All right, change, or as Bowie said it, changes. What are we talking about when we talk about change? And as managers or as people working with managers, how do we deal with and cope with the idea of change? So again, with this topic, this chapter gets into a lot of nitty gritty detail. So big picture, we just want to kind of get a sense of the key concepts covered in this chapter and think about how they might be relevant to our careers and where we are at this stage and how that might change over time as we grow through our career as well. And so thinking about this idea of change, as we can see in our book, we can think of it as any alteration, so any shifts, movements, changes, in terms of the organisation's people, structure or technology. And as we saw in our last chapter, chapter 5, we know all about structure now. So this is the relationships of who's reporting to who has authority, responsibility, how the organisation is designed, any of those coordinating mechanisms. So these could be procedures or ways of working, potentially the organisational culture fits in there, how people's jobs are designed, and that includes the redesign of jobs, potentially in response to some changes that are happening either internally in the organisation or externally. And as we know as well, about spans of control. So how many people a manager is responsible for. If that changes, then there'll be change to the structure in the organisation. We also have changes in technology, and we're not just talking about like computers and stuff like that. Technology also includes the way the organisation runs, so the processes, the methods, the procedures, and that is often improvements. We would hope that they're usually improvements rather than things moving backwards, but also new ideas might come into the organisation and change things. People might learn stuff and then change things. There might be new equipment come in. All sorts of things can affect the way the organisation works and functions. And we refer to that as technology changes. And then there's changes can happen at the people level, both in terms of who the people are, so changes in personnel, either new people joining the organisation, people leaving, shifts in jobs and that sort of stuff. But as well as that, we can have people can have shifts and changes in terms of attitudes, what their expectations are. So, you know, people might become a parent or they might have other responsibilities. They might be growing in their career and they get more, you know, as they increase their expectation, increase their experience, they might want to have more responsibility. They might want to try different things. And so their expectations in the job change. Perceptions may change as well. Things might happen that people kind of start to either have an improved perception of things or, you know, start to perceive things as not so good. And again, it may be in reference to them as well. You know, they might be in an environment where they feel like they can't get a promotion because there's nowhere to go in the organisation, and that may shift their perception of the organisation and their role within the organisation. And then people can change in terms of their behaviours as well. So all of these different things we can think of as little cogs in the machinery, and shifts in any of them can create then shifts in other things that mean that we need to be constantly aware of any shifts. And also we need to often plan for and manage those shifts in ways that are designed to improve the organisation in some way, shape or form, or in terms of creating new products and getting things out into the world as well, and growing and building the business. So in terms of factors that can create change in organisations, we have, as you remember back to our model of the external environment for the organisation, any of those external forces, both in terms of the immediate environment that the organisation sits within, or the broader social factors, can result in changes being needed in the organisation. So again, if we think back to our idea of survival of the fittest, fittest being the entity, so individual or organisation, that is best adapted to its environment, any of these changes in terms of the way the market works, so changing consumer perceptions or wants, technology changes, government changes, economic changes, labour market changes, or, you know, maybe little things like a pandemic, can result in shifts that the organisation has to respond to, or that it can take advantage of. And in addition, we have internal forces, so things that happen within the organisation that are either as a consequence of external changes, or that may just be something that is happening within the organisation that is creating change within the organisation. And this can be things, so we've looked at strategy in our last week, which is the overall direction and the plans and action that the organisation wants to take. We may have new and changing strategies, and that is often the case because we need to, you know, go in a new direction, or we need to launch a new product, or we need to do a new thing, and we'll have a strategy associated with that. Our workforce composition may change. So the book refers to the example of things like, you know, you might start off with a young team, and then they all stick together, and then as that team grows, new people come in, feel that there's this kind of glass ceiling that they can't get through because of the workforce competition. And so it may be necessary to change the composition of the workforce so that those new people coming through have career progression opportunities, as well as there may be needs to change the organisation just in terms of its normal growth. So when we're a young kind of scrappy organisation, the organisation workforce needs are going to be different as we start to grow and mature and become more stable. And then there may be shifts in employee attitudes that are generating internal change as well. So we have this term called a change agent, who we consider to be people who act to catalyse, or the ones that cultivate and shift that change and create those shifts, and that also assume that responsibility for managing that change. So this can be anyone in the organisation that is in charge of or trying to make some kind of change happen in the organisation. And this is a skill that we can develop. And as managers, given that change is a constant thing, it's a skill that we kind of need to think about and need to cultivate. And our book gives us a bit of a process for how we might begin to develop this skill. I'll show you in the picture. And it has 3 components. So the first one has quite a few aspects to it. So being able to assess the climate for change, there's a few different ingredients to that and ways of doing that, a kind of diagnosis of, is this organisation ready for change and does it have the ability to embrace change? So have a look at that in the book in terms of breaking down what that diagnosis is. Then being able to choose an approach for managing any resistance to change, and we'll get to resistance to change in our next video. And then being able to communicate both prior to, during, and after the change process, so that people go along, are brought along with you, and change isn't something that is kind of put upon them. There's a great quote from a semi-colleague of mine who created a process called appreciative inquiry. His name is Cooper Ryder. And he has this quote, which is that people don't resist change, they resist being forced to change. And so being able to communicate and bring people along with you is a way to help facilitate that change.